and welcome to Gamers Table, a discussion of tabletop role-playing games and other topics related to the gamer subculture. Be warned, this show may contain some explicit material that may not be suitable for all audiences.
Hello and welcome to Gamers Table. My name is Eric.
This is Mike.
This is Mark.
This is Dan.
This is Shannon.
This is Dave.
This is Greg.
And I'm Sean.
This episode we're going to talk about social skills.
My favorite.
It is Mike's favorite. Mike's favorite. How about that?
Do any of us really have social skills?
Mike would rather roll a diplomacy check than actually have to say anything.
I don't
That's
think
okay, though.
anyone in this
Saves
group
time.
has any social skills.
Twitter doesn't count, Shannon.
What that means is in role-playing games, you have certain skills that you use to interact with primarily NPCs. If you're really lame, you use them on PCs because you're not interacting at the table. But they're primarily for interacting with NPCs and influencing their decisions. My question is that a crutch? Is that something that, people will use in lieu of actual role play?
No.
I don't think so.
Totally agree. It's not a crutch for me to roll an arbitrary strength skill. I'm not that strong. I may not be as quote-unquote diplomacized as my character.
I think the better example is intelligence.
Intelligence,
You
yeah.
can't play a genius
No.
necessarily.
I could.
You can try.
You could try.
And you can fail.
I have documentation.
He has papers, is what he's saying.
Papers. Like he's rolling papers, maybe. That's about it.
Hey, they legalized
He has
it. I'm
no
in.
They
papers.
say AKC at the top.
No, I don't think it's a crutch at all. Because it's, first off, a lot of games glaze over these things. I mean, a lot of games are so combat heavy or so confrontation heavy that it glazes over these things. I mean, the early editions of D&D didn't really go into this too much, did they, Mike?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. The only thing that separates, I think, a good storyline RPG from, say, a dungeon crawl is the social skills, I believe.
Sure. That's one of my primary arguments when people call me a power gamer, and I say, no, I don't want. I'm not a power gamer. I just want a character that is both well-rounded and effective. I want to be able to play the fighter who can also negotiate a good price on a sword,
Well, our contention of your wanting to be a power gamer has more to do with your not wanting to have any gaps in your defense.
Well, yeah,
which you do not want to have.
Nobody who would.
That's not a way.
It's not a matter of want.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So what's your counterpoint?
Well, I don't really. I'm asking that as a general
Roll
question.
credit shows over. Pa, pa, pa.
I think that I do agree that it is a component of the game that can be used to overcome shortcomings. If you're not a real charismatic person in real life and you're playing a character who is, yes, rolling a diplomacy or a bluff.
Might be why they're playing. I mean,
Right.
we kind of agree that a lot of us play these games to fulfill whatever we're not kind of getting out of real life, quote unquote.
Right. But when I use the term crutch, what I'm talking about is just never even bothering playing the character.
You know what that reminds me of? It's not so much social skills. It really is role-playing in general. The last time Deuce was with us and we talked about power gaming, he told me off mic, of course he wasted it, so that's why I'm bringing it up now. He's like, his group playing Pathfinder have discovered there's a spell you can ask your deity a question. Basically a very simple yes-no question.
Right.
And his party just kind of stopped playing the game because over a long enough timeline, enough questions, you can just triangulate where you need to go and do whatever it is you need to do.
So they're playing I Spy with their deity?
Basically, yes.
Well, then the GM just needs to say, well, your deity is ignoring you for abusing the privilege.
But in the end, that GM was Deuce, so he's not going to do that.
Hey, Abbott!
Yeah.
I hate that guy.
So, I mean, sure, it can be, but again, I think a lot of times when we talk about these topics, I think we want to talk over it. And maybe it's an aspect of the game that just doesn't matter to some people.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that. I think that if you use it instead of interacting with the game master or with players, I think that you're missing out on a big opportunity to really develop your character. But I mean, it's the difference between role playing ROLL and role playing ROLE.
Sure.
It depends on your style.
Some people don't want to come to the table and act.
Right.
Right.
This is something that I've kind of hit on recently through us doing our actual plays. And it came to us like the ding light bulb a couple of Mondays ago when a a bunch of people didn't show up, and Woodside ended up running Iron Kingdoms.
Right.
And I made a what was it? It was an Ogren. I made an Ogren, and for some reason, the old Monty Python sketch where the guy thought he was being chased by a giant hedgehog, and the hedgehog was just like Dinsdale all the time. I said that, and then bam, I had the voice for the character. And then Greg says, that's going to be the name of my character. He named his character Dinsdale, and for the rest of the game, that was the voice I used. And I only interacted with Greg's character ever. And it was fun.
Mark, you just told that story last week on
Yes, you
Mike.
did.
Whatever. Greg's here. He can chime
You can
in.
corroborate.
Yes,
So I get to cut
and
it
I
from the other
corroborate that.
And
that
you can
that's
shut the
what
fuck
happened.
up, woman.
I don't know if that's why Mike was laughing too.
We didn't have to do any interaction roles because we were interacting in character. Greg's not a guy that really does voices, but it still worked out.
Because I do them horribly and I get made fun of mostly by
Sticking
you every
feathers up
time
your
I
butt
do.
does not make you a chicken.
But
Right.
and to that point though is if you have to have a game master who's willing to give you that leeway. If it's a good RP moment, and I've never seen, like, let's say we're playing a game with Mike. Mike has never said, unless you're trying to take advantage of a situation, Mike has never said, well, that just doesn't work. We're not going to use that. If you have a good, like, poignant RP moment. But if you have to have a game master who's willing to give up that little bit of control to say, okay, that was a really cool RP moment. We'll go with that. Your guy is this, or like somebody's. I'm
In lieu of rolling dice.
in lieu of rolling a dice.
The
Or
Woodside
even-
was rolling off the cuff. He'd had no real plan, as opposed to when he ran Dark Heresy, and he had planned out to the point where we couldn't roleplay because it didn't go along with his story. This time we had a lot of freedom for just jabber.
Right.
I can also see needing these skills and needing the mechanics at high level, or needing it at high power levels if we're talking about like a superhero game, because there's being smart, there's gamers table smart, there's real world actual smart, and then there's Reed Richards smart.
Right.
Right.
And at that level, you need the mechanics to say, I am so smart, I can theorize this, and I can make people believe this because I'm just so smart. I don't think that could ever come out at the table. You need the mechanics to back it
I
up.
understand, but there's also people who are really, really smart who are socially inept.
Oh, yes.
And they can figure out all kinds of theorems, but they couldn't tell you about them because they can't speak to you.
It's like
like
Sheldon.
Kuthar Polly.
Yeah, or Sheldon.
yeah.
Just terrible social skills.
I was several years ago. I was watching a documentary on Bill Gates, and they interviewed somebody. I don't even remember who it was. That he had just ran into Bill Gates out in public. This was after Bill Gates was Bill Gates, so he had the cash. But he ran into Bill Gates at a movie theater, and the guy said, "It was like I almost wanted to walk up and help him buy a movie ticket because he didn't look like he could handle the concept." Bill Gates is a smart guy, but if you look at the guy's a nerd,
It's old school nerd.
right?
Going kind of something that you said, Dan, you're talking about how you have to utilize these, games utilize these things. I think sometimes, depending on the game you play, sometimes it oversimplifies it. Now think about,
Oh, yeah.
You talk about high levels. If you get a high enough level, let's use 3.5 D&D because that's like our baseline. But you have a 3.5 D&D character with a high enough charisma and enough points in bluff or diplomacy or something. The numbers, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but for like diplomacy, it's not off of like their willpower save or anything like that. It's a stagnant number, correct?
Yeah,
Right.
It has something to do with whether or not they're hostile. Right?
It starts with their views towards you.
Right.
And Mike has even done it as based off an RP moment to do something Dan hates. I'm going to go to the Epic group. And when we were organizing a crusade into IUs, I would do the RP moments with Mike, and then he would have me roll. Sometimes I would get a little bit of a bonus to the roll, or if my argument was flawed, then I'd get a little bit of a minus, but we worked it out.
Right.
That's actually a good point you bring up there, is that you can RP your social situations and get a bonus to then the mechanic of it. And as a matter of fact, I would argue that you should have a good line of reasoning before you even are allowed to roll. If you just want to say, "Oh, I want to lie, pass the guard," what do you tell them? You got to give me a little something,
I was
even if you
about
don't
to-
act it out.
I was about to say that same thing. I was going to say the only times I can remember rolling and like that sort of thing, it was like I told you what I was going to do, and then you had me roll to see if they bought it.
Well, see, that's I think using that as a mechanic, though. You say, okay, I have a such and such charisma, and I'm going to try and bluff my way past old boy, and you actually role play and say, this is what I'm going to say, blah 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 blah. And the game master can go, okay, you get your bonus, and I'll give you an additional 2, or I'll take away that was crap, and I'm going to take away 4 from your bonus because you were
Your story's crap.
yeah. So yeah, I think that would be okay, but just leaving it as a static number, eventually, especially when you have a power gamer like myself, you're going to put enough ranks into it. You're going to put enough into your charisma that you can talk the panties off of anybody.
Right.
That's a flaw of the mechanics.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I'm
Shouldn't
not.
be static.
I think that kind of defeats the purpose of role playing. I mean, isn't the point of doing this to, and yeah, I said this last week too.
No.
But isn't the point of doing this to use your imagination and to play?
But I think that that's a much deeper topic. But I think that you get so far removed from that, and you get so focused on mechanics that you lose sight on the fact that you're supposed to be interacting in this fantasy world.
Right.
You forget the character you want to be, and you just become this like super strong or like super awesome, whatever.
Or super ego or whatever.
Just sitting there playing the stats and
I think,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a downward spiral that I think a lot of games get into. Maybe the campaign has gone on longer than it should have, or you just lose interest in your character where you forget that the character is more than just the stats on the page. And you just roll your dice and show up and dick around on your phone or whatnot.
I wouldn't give equal weight to all social situations in a game. If you're, on one hand, just trying to negotiate the price on a dagger, I ain't going to mess around with that all day. But if you're, like to take another page out of Brian's book, if you're trying to court the countess of a large kingdom, that's going to take a while. We're actually going to role play this out, and it's not going to come down to one roll. I think it just depends on how important the scene is, too.
It's about the goal and how difficult do you want it to be.
Yes, courting the princess or the baroness or whatever. It's almost like a weighted board exam. You got to get a string of good ones before you start screwing up.
But that reminds me of L5R, Legend of the Five Rings. If you're doing a winter court campaign, all you're really doing is socially interacting for the better part of that scenario. Because it's going to be the long winter. It's supposed to be months of gameplay while there's nothing to do but hang around the castle and talk to other samurai, and maybe try to hook up with one of them, maybe try to weasel out of a betrothal, maybe get a little poon on the side, whatever your goal is.
I don't think
Side poon is always a goal. Side poon.
Cause honor duels between all your other rivals so they don't
does
notice.
not have poon, Mark. They don't.
I thought that was the Japanese word for it.
Get your vernacular straight.
But then we look at vampire,
Right.
Shannon looks
where
ill.
the secondary skills are almost secondary to the role playing unless you run it very combat heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's always been the contention. Is like, I think we played it wrong for many years, Greg.
Well, no.
We still
you
kind of
got-
play it wrong.
No, the creators of those games had an idea in mind, but nobody played it that way. I've seen many White Wolf groups. I'll lump them all together. They all degenerated into combat heavy because people just wanted to be death machines.
Well, yeah,
Because it appealed to 17, 18, 19-year-old boys.
That's
and
when we were playing.
That's what you want to do. You want to beat ass. And just and like with social skills, my contention is the mechanics are there because this is a simulation. Okay, on the back end, this is a pen and paper ones and zeros computer simulation for a tabletop game, and they're there for you to use, take, or leave, depending on the type of game that you want to play.
I think also for some people it might be like genuinely difficult. Like they want to play these games because these are big,
Or they want to play these games because their friends are doing it, but they're not wanting to play the same type of game.
But what I was going to say was maybe they aren't able to interact with people like that. Like maybe it's harder for them to have a conversation than roll some dice.
Maybe they're socially awkward, in other words.
Yes,
Yes.
Shannon.
Yeah.
I said it very socially awkwardly too. Thanks.
Yes, you did. This could kind of go on to an addendum to the Bard episode, because that's really all the Bard is social interaction skills.
No, my bard is an ass beater with a crossbow, Mark. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Clarence the Clumsy, that's his only bonus there. His only +1 on the entire sheet is a 13 charisma.
As the character is laid out in the game, particularly in Dungeons and Dragons, it's a social interacting character. It has diplomacy, some sneaking around type stuff, but mostly it's the guy that's out front, distracting, interacting, negotiating, other things as well.
He's the fantasy face